Okay, start it over. Wait, no, there it is. There it is. There it is. All right. So, wisdom and health. And anytime you think of Proverbs, this verse probably comes to mind when it comes about health. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. And we understand that. Brother Chuck's actually already talked about this, and it's a good verse for application to our lives. How that having the right attitude, the right spirit, the right heart, a merry heart, is good for you. And this has been backed up. We're going to talk about this in just a minute. This has been backed up now by scientific studies. Believe it or not, they did a study just recently, and they found that the best, some of the best medicines for depression, antidepressant medicines, are not as good as having a right attitude and getting out and exercising. And in fact, there has been no new antidepressants in the last 15 or 20 years because none of them are better than a placebo, which is just a sugar pill. And the reason for that is because, and don't knock the sugar pill, because if you believe it'll work, that's kind of like this idea here, having the right attitude, oftentimes it works. So again, what Proverbs was saying way back in Solomon's time has been proven true by science today. Not that we needed the science. All right, so let's take a look at some things here to show you the difference. So these instructions were found in the Papyrus Ebers. I don't have that one in my library, but anyway, they say it's there, or say it was true. This is a medical book written in Egypt about 1552 BC. So this would be compatible to what Solomon was writing about. So these are some of the things. If you wanted to go with Egyptian medicine back in that day instead of the Bible, this is what you do. To prevent the hair from turning gray, it's way too late for me, but maybe some of you would like to try this. Anoint it with the blood of a black calf, which has been boiled in oil. Make sure you get that part right. Or with the fat of a rattlesnake. I like that one. Yeah. Or if you're losing hair, too late again for me. When it falls out, one remedy is to apply a mixture of 6 fats, namely those of the horse, the hippopotamus, the crocodile, the cat, the snake, and of course the ever necessary ibex. To strengthen it, it's like a gazelle. To strengthen it, anoint it with the tooth of a donkey crushed in honey. And to get a splinter out, apply worm's blood and donkey's manure. Now, most of those are kind of silly. The last one could kill you. If you put manure on a wound, it's going to become infected. And there's many others. I have a book called None of These Diseases, written by a doctor. And he compares what the Bible talks about in the book of Leviticus when it comes to health and what the ancient Egyptian books talked about. One of those would kill you, and one of those would keep you alive. Avoiding certain meats, avoiding things that you shouldn't be around infectious people. How did those people know that unless God told them? The alternative is to listen to the Egyptians and wind up killing yourself with donkey manure. Or the snake. Yeah, catching that snake could kill you before you could get your hair back. So, we're going to talk about this in 3 different ways. Physical factors of health based on the Bible, emotional, and spiritual. And they're all going to be connected. So Exodus chapter 15, verse 26. And said, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, wilt do that which is right in his sight, wilt give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I brought upon the Egyptians. For I am the Lord thy God that healeth thee. So, why would God be interested in our bodily health? Because he's our creator, our maker, and he desires us to have a good, healthy life. But that is conditional on hearkening to the Lord's voice, doing what is right, listening to his commandments, keeping his statutes. In other words, this health is preventative much more than restorative. So this is not a cure, though there may be some of that. This is mostly to keep you from getting sick. I will put none of these diseases upon you. No, that's really small type. That many letters. I'm not going to read it all. But if you wanted to read it up close, you'd have to look it up in your Bibles because it's kind of hard to see up there. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 1 through 19. And the Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying unto them, speaking unto the children of Israel, saying, these are the beasts that ye shall eat among the beasts that are on the earth. Whatsoever parteth the hoof and is cloven-hooded and cheweth the cud among the beasts, thus shall ye eat. Nevertheless, these shall ye not eat that chew the cud, or them that divide the hoof, as the camel, which because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you. And the coney, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you. And the hare, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you. And the swine, I know some of you are already crying in your bacon, because he divide the hoof, and he be cloven hooven, yet he cheweth not the cub, he is unclean to you. Of their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcass you shall not touch. They are unclean to you. Now, if you go through the whole list, it's a very interesting list. It's an interesting study. And we're not under the Old Testament law, by the way. So this to them was law. To us, it's a guideline. And it's not a bad one, and it does with our health. So not only in the areas of food, but in the areas of quarantine. Keep in mind, up until the Middle Ages, in the cities of Europe, open sewers ran down the middle of the street. In the morning, you'd get your bedpan, your thunder pot, whatever else they want to call it, throw it out the window. You didn't want to be taking your morning walk during that time. It would run to the gutter, which is in the middle of the street, and it would run. And the cities in those days stank. It's no wonder they had the Black Death and the plague and all those things. They were completely unsanitary. But when you look at what the Lord said in Leviticus chapter 13, verse 1, and the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or a bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto one of his sons the priest. And the priest shall look at the plague on the skin of his flesh, and when the hair in the plague is turned white, and the plague in sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy, and the priest shall look upon him and pronounce him unclean. Now let me skip down. Anyway, the idea here, again, I'm not going to read all of this. You're familiar with it. So he would go to the priest would say, that's leprosy. And the word leprosy here is used as an overall term, some kind of a skin disease. And when that happened, they were to be quarantined. They were kept outside the camp. For us, that looks very cruel. But understand, that's the only way you could keep disease from spreading. And even in Leviticus, it talks about leprosy of a house. And you know what that was? That's mold, black mold. And, we didn't catch up with black mold until just a few decades ago. Now we know you got mold in your house, you're going to get really, really sick. But they called it leprosy back then. They said if that's the case, you clean it, you smoke it with some fire. If it goes away, you're fine. If not, then you burn down the house and build another one, or the tent. You don't live there. And again, how did those people know that? Well, they didn't. But God, who created the world and all the things that are in it, he knew that. What about latrines? Again, we talked about the Middle Eastern cities. If there be any man among you that is not clean by reason of uncleanness, that chanceth him by night, then shall he go abroad out of the camp. He shall not come within the camp. But it shall be when evening cometh, he shall wash himself with water. When the sun is down, he shall come into the camp again. Thus thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go abroad. And thou shalt have a paddle, that's a shovel, upon thy weapon. And it shall be when thou wilt ease thyself. I don't have to tell you what that means. Thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back and cover that which cometh from thee. That's very polite language. Don't go to the potty in your own house, or in this case, in your own town. Again, up until the, good night, 1700s, 1600s, when people decided to go to the restroom, they just went on street corners, on houses, on streets. There was no public restrooms. It's unbelievable. I mean, the Romans had better sewage and sewage treatment than the people of the Middle East. And again, it's no wonder when we look back on that why the diseases were so terrible. What is it? 2/3 of the known world in Europe died during the Black Death. Unbelievable numbers, but not unbelievable when you realize the way they lived. They brought their animals in the house. They had no concept of disease. And of course, it was years later that we realized what germs do and how they're transmitted and all those things. But the Lord, all these years ago, said, do these things, and none of these diseases will be upon you. He knew. And in fact, it was only through reading the Bible some of those started to understand the danger of those things. Now I'm going to skip this one. It's the same idea. Here, touching the dead, there were warnings that if a person was dead, then if you had to touch him, you had to take him out, you had to bury him, and then you were unclean until evening because, again, you didn't know what killed him. And so, again, the Bible said, don't touch anybody else until you've had time to go out, cleanse yourself. And that cleansing was usually complete immersion in water. They had to find a place that was deep enough and wash themselves that way. So this brings us to the question, why would God prohibit the eating of certain food? The idea of quarantines, the idea of sanitation. Because these things, pork, shellfish, vulture, dogs, those things are scavengers. If you see a pig in the wild and you watch it, it eats just about anything, including its own children, if they're not careful, or if you're not careful. And the same thing with buzzards and with dogs and all those things. They eat things that you shouldn't eat, and that gets in their bodies. So what they eat naturally is dangerous to humans. God put them here to be scavengers, to clean those things up. Quarantine and proper sanitation prevented the spread of disease. All of these things, centuries before man ever understood the germ or how disease was spread. In the Bible, from the very beginning. You're my people. I want to have you live long. If you do what I tell you to do, follow my commandments, you will live long and have none of these diseases. So, what about today? Should we be observing those prohibitions? Personally, I'm not going to eat any vultures or buzzards or dogs. It's not going to be in my menu at all. Or cat, any of those things. Basically, if it eats meat, I'm probably not going to eat it. But much of this is still good advice. Though some foods, like pork, so I'm going to let you off the hook here, these things are raised on farms where they're not fed with garbage. They're not allowed to do their natural thing. I had an uncle who raised pork in San Antonio, and this kind of thing came up. He said, you know what the government requires of us for our pigs to be raised and sold in market? He said, they have to be raised on concrete. They have to have water that's fresh every day. We have to clean their pens. I think he said almost every other day. He said they live cleaner lives than I do in my own house. So if you control what goes in them, it's not going to be bad that you would eat it. Again, pigs in the wild are filled with all kinds of parasites. You have to cook the meat thoroughly, all the rest of it. So just be careful with those things, but understand it's not a law. I've known some Baptist preachers who said, I won't eat pork. That's fine. That's a conviction for you. I have no problem with it, but it's not something that is in any way required of New Testament believers. What happened with Peter on the roof proved that. The Lord let down a sheet filled with all manner of unclean animals, and he said, prepare and eat. Kill it and eat it. Peter said, oh man, I've never done that in my life. He said, what I tell you to do, you don't tell me not to do. And so it was about the Gentiles, but it also applied to this. Gentiles were against their law. They couldn't have anything to do with Gentiles either. And so the Lord was changing those things. It does not apply anymore. So there were physical things to do with health that the Lord talked about, common sense things now. But there are also emotional factors. So Norman Cousins was a journalist, and you can look this up. I got this long before Google came around, but you can look up Norman Cousins. He was a journalist, he was an author, he was diagnosed with a connective tissue disease in 1964. Experts at Dr. Rusk Rehabilitation Clinic named the illness ankylosing spondylitis. Got two nurses in here. You guys make me nervous when I have to pronounce stuff like that. He was told he had 1 in 500 chance of recovery. He was a dead man walking. Cousins developed his own recovery program. He took massive intravenous doses of vitamin C, today we'd say vitamin C and vitamin D, and had self-induced bouts of laughter brought on by films on the television show Candid Camera, Marx Brothers Films, and the Three Stooges. He said, I made the joyous discovery that 10 minutes of genuine belly laughter had an anesthetic effect and would give me at least 2 hours of pain-free sleep. When the pain-killing effect of the laughter wore off, we would switch on the motion picture projector again. This is how long ago that was. And not infrequently, it would lead to another pain-free interval. His struggle with that illness is detailed in his 1979 book, Anatomy of an Illness as Perceived by the Patient. Now, from his own self-experimenting with the Three Stooges, I know how silly that sounds, came a whole branch of medicine that deals with positive thinking, not just I'm going to believe it so it's true, but the idea of having the right ideas or the right positive outlook when it comes to things like fighting cancer. Um, Norman Cousins died of heart failure in November 30th, 1990, Los Angeles, California, having survived years longer than his doctor predicted. 10 years after his heart attack, 26 years after his collagen illness, and 36 years after his doctors first diagnosed his heart disease. When I was in college, I was working for the newspaper, a little college in Dallas, and we had a doctor come and do a talk, and I was to go and interview him afterwards. And he is the first one who quoted Norman Cousins. And so afterward, I talked to him, and this guy, I have the story. I kept all those clippings of the newspaper articles I wrote. But this man took cancer patients who were terminal, and other doctors said, there's nothing we can do for you. And he treated them for cancer, but he also, what his words were, taught them how to have fun. And his remission rate was 70% by teaching them. He said, we teach them things like how to juggle. We teach them that they have to have a time for recreation and a time for just playing and laughter. And his rate was 70% with the treatment, but also with just the idea of this positive outlook, this emotional factor of health. I don't have his story in this, but I guess he's still in Fort Worth. I have no idea. So here's what the book of Proverbs says. Again, Proverbs 14:30, a sound heart is the life of the flesh, but envy the rottenness of the bones. So this is a contrasting proverb. A sound heart is a heart at peace. It's a quiet heart. The power of that kind of heart is it's the life. It's the energy. It's the source of life in the flesh. So there's a tie-in between, again, the emotional, the sound heart, and your body. The Lord knows this because, again, the Lord created us. And then it says, envy causes rottenness to the bones. In both cases, an emotional state causes good or bad health. All right, so what does this tell us? Whoops, one too many. That physical health is related to emotional and often spiritual health. Man is created as body and soul. He's created with emotions and spirit and a mind and a body, and those are connected. And the Bible tells us they're connected. You can't separate those. And so what you do in one area of your life, your spirit, your mind, your heart, is going to affect the other parts. And we know this naturally. We understand this through common sense. But we don't often emphasize and work on those things. Now, I think I'll get to some examples in a minute. Otherwise, I'm just going to preach myself out of time. All right, so Proverbs 15:13. A merry heart maketh a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart the spirit is broken. The connection between a merry heart and our outward appearance. The heart shows in our countenance, our face, and the way we appear. Connection between sorrow and spirit. Sorrow breaks a person's spirit. This is the emotional. Here, the emotional affects the spiritual. So again, those are all connected. Those are all part of who we are. When we die, our spirit is taken to be with the Lord. Our body is put in the ground. And one day, that will be resurrected. Why would the Lord do that? Except that's the way He created us. And so, for eternity, we're going to be what we were, both spiritual and physical. And so that connection is restored and kept through eternity. And right now, we need to understand there's a connection in our hearts and our lives between the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. Another one, Proverbs 16:24. Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, and health to the bones. This verse tells us the connection between language and health. Sweet, encouraging, uplifting words can affect both the physical and the spiritual health of the listener. That's not me just saying this is my opinion. That's actually what it's saying. You want to help somebody? Watch your words. You want to hurt somebody? Don't watch your words. And sticks and stones may break my bones, words will never hurt me. It's really not true, especially who gives the words. Parents who are overly critical of their children, criticize, don't encourage them, they will break that child. We know this. And a parent who encourages their child, that child is going to go better, go farther, and do more. So you've got to be careful with your words. And if you want to help somebody, encourage them. Have that gift of encouragement. Leora's not here. So Leora's the biggest encourager I know. She has the gift of encouragement beyond anybody I can toss in that in. And I'm just bragging on her. She's not here. She'd be embarrassed. But she does. Um, it doesn't matter how badly I may have messed up a sermon. She tells me, that was just a really good sermon. That was a wonderful sermon. It doesn't matter, I don't know, whatever it is. You pick it, she's going to encourage me in it. I really, criticism is not something that comes out of her. She does get upset. There's things that bother her, sure. But when it comes to family, when it comes to her kids, when it comes to her fellow church members, you're just not going to catch her. You'd really have to do something bad to get her to even flare up in any kind of anger. And even then, she's not going to attack you personally. So again, she's an encourager, and that kind of encouragement is health to the bones, sweet to the soul, health to the bones. Proverbs 17:24, a merry heart, again, doeth good like a medicine. A broken spirit drieth the bones. So, according to these verses, what can help us heal and what can make us sick? A merry heart, which is positive emotions, positive attitude, heals, but a broken spirit, negative emotions, negative attitude, dries the bones, causes sickness. Some illnesses that could be described as dried bones, these are things that are eternal, not visible on the surface. Cancers, ulcers, illnesses caused by stress. Does science tell us these things, yes, today? Absolutely. They tell you got too much stress in your life. Get out there, take a walk. Get out of that stressful situation. It's giving you ulcers. It's causing you to have high blood pressure. Again, all these things that science now accepts as established fact, the Bible was talking about centuries and centuries and centuries before. So pay attention. Listen closely to what the Bible's saying. Start there, and then use that as a guide for what science is telling you. If it agrees, then boy, jump in with both feet and do these things as much as you possibly can. All right, let me get a drink of water. And we'll look at spiritual factors. Several verses. Proverbs 11:17. The merciful man doeth good to his own soul, but he that is cruel troubles his own flesh. 15:32. He that refuses instruction despises his own soul, but he that hears reproof gets understanding. 6:32. But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacks understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. 18:7. A fool's mouth is his destruction. His lips are the snare of his soul. 21:23. Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from trouble. 15:4. A wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness therein is a breach in the spirit. So in the preceding verses, we see this connection. Good or bad actions of the body have resultant consequences in our soul. We don't put it together that way most times in life. But it's true. When he talks about adultery hurts your spirit, your soul, he's not just talking about you're going to get in trouble, you're going to get punished, God's going to catch up to you. He's talking about it's damaging you spiritually to be involved in that kind of sin. It's not just, be careful, God's going to get you. What's the old black gospel song? Elvis Presley sang it. Lately, I can't remember anything. I said Elvis Presley. I know. No, hold on. Give me a second here. You may run on for a long time. Ever heard that song? You may run on for a long time. Let me tell you, God Almighty's going to cut you down. Go tell that long-tongued liar. Go tell that midnight rider. Let me tell you, God Almighty's going to cut him down. The last verse is the guy sneaks into his neighbor's wife, and the husband's home. And so he said, God's going to cut you down. So there's a connection between those things, the body and soul. But it's not just the physical consequences. It's the fact that you're actually damaging yourself spiritually. Look at verse 18:14. The spirit of man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit, who can bear? This proverb tells us that a brave, fighting, or sound spirit within a man will give strength when we are sick, but a wounded, broken, smitten spirit will not give life, but instead will bring us down. Now, it applies to everything we've talked about. But again, he says it's the spirit of man. So here is an internal spiritual thing that is having an effect upon the physical part of you. I think these are extremely important. I think they're very extremely true. I think they've been borne out in scientific studies, but I think many times we as Christians don't hold on to them and don't accept them as strongly as we should. I don't know. It's just us in this world sometimes. In Ezekiel, it says, "Behold, all souls are mine, as the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son is mine. The soul that sinneth, it shall die." God says that the soul that sins will die. And is this a physical or a spiritual death? Well, it would include both. Physically, he'll be separated from his body. Spiritually, he'll be separated from God. And so death is both physical and spiritual. 1 John 5, verse 16. Again, this is the connection between sin, which we do with our physical body, and our soul. "If any man see his brother sin a sin which is not unto death, he shall ask, and he shall give him life for them that sin not unto death." Talking about praying to the Lord. "There is a sin unto death. I do not say that he shall pray for it. All unrighteousness is sin, and there is a sin not unto death." So this is one of those controversial verses. A lot of people have different ideas, so I'm going to give you what I think. A sin unto death is a repeated, unrepentant, habitual sin, especially one which brings shame upon the Lord or upon his church. So we're talking about, he says, a brother. So this is a saved person. This is not a lost person. He says, if you see your brother sin a sin which is not unto death, pray about that. Ask the Lord to bring him out of that. Ask for forgiveness. Ask for grace until he realizes. But there is a sin unto death. And I think that's when they simply say, I don't care. I'm not going to quit doing what I'm doing. And so after the church disciplines them, after their friends and brothers and sisters of Christ talk to them, they still keep doing this, the Lord takes them home. And that doesn't mean, well, they're never really saved anyway. That's between him and the Lord. But there is a sin unto death. And the Lord will say, you're my child, and you're on the earth acting like you belong to Satan, but you belong to me, so I'm just going to take you home. And he takes their life. And so again, here is a spiritual connection to a physical condition. He says there's a sin unto death, and you need to be careful of it. You need to be aware of it. The highway of the upright, which is the righteous, is to depart from or avoid evil. He that keeps guards his way preserves his soul. According to this verse, how can we protect our soul? By walking the highway, which keeps us from sin and evil. By guarding our way, our lifestyle, we protect our soul. We see the connection again between the physical, our walk, our path, and the spiritual or soul. I don't mean to be belaboring it, but you can't get away from this connection. You can't believe or think, I can do certain things, and then it's not going to have effect. I can pray, I can ask for forgiveness, I can keep living that way, which means you never really were asking for forgiveness anyway, and then not think that it's going to affect you. Perhaps if you keep living that way and it becomes well known, the Lord will take you home. But even if that doesn't happen, it still affects your soul. It still hurts you. It hurts you with your family. It hurts you with your wife, with your husband, with your kids. They may not understand why. You may not understand why. But there's a part of you that is affected by physical sin. This is like your physical health. Also, your spiritual health is affected by sin. And you've got to be careful of these things, aware of these things. Ultimately, as the song said, you may run on for a long time. Let me tell you, God Almighty is going to cut you down, but it will catch up with you. I don't have to tell you horror stories of pastors who've gotten caught. Just open up your news feed. Just recently, one of the biggest churches, I can't remember where it's even at. I don't pay attention after a while. Guy's been preaching for years. Finally came out that he molested a child when she was 12 years old, about 20 years ago. Yeah, he Gateway Church. I'm glad they didn't put Baptist on it. He's not a Baptist. He resigned and then he was already resigned. His son was taken over. Now his son is resigned. Uh, it's just a total mess. But he ran on for a long time, and it finally caught up with him. Those kind of things, there's consequences. Even if there is forgiveness, there's still consequences in this world, and there's consequences in our eyes or in our life. And so, like the song says, well, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking down in love. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Your little ears, your little hands, your little feet, and your little mouth, all those physical things are connected to your soul, to your spirit. And even if you don't get caught, even if you don't get punished, you're still hurting your spiritual health in the same way that eating the wrong things and not getting enough exercise and not getting out and walking and, all the physical things that we can do that would affect our emotional and our spiritual health, our physical health are affecting it. So also your soul is being affected by those things as well. So let me bring it to conclusion. Look at that. I'm even going to beat Robert. My goodness. If I'd known that, I would have preached a little bit longer. He was worried about it. I'm proud of it. Usually I keep you guys too long. All right. So Genesis chapter 2 tells us that God breathed spirit into man, who was formed from the earth, and man became a living soul. Therefore, our nature is both physical and spiritual. Some call man's nature a dichotomy, which means soul and body. Others a trichotomy, body, soul, and spirit. Some citing Mark 12, verse 30, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, with all thy strength. Even say man is a quadronomy. Keep that one in your vocabulary list. Your emotions, your spirit, your mental, and your physical. I don't get really hung up on this. Definitely we are two-part beings. I don't have any problem with the three-part. There's places in the Bible that says that. Paul talks about body, soul, and spirit. Jesus is the one that said all four. What it means is that we are spiritual and we are physical. That's the way we're created. And you can divide the spiritual part into the mental and to the spiritual. That's fine too. Get three parts, or like the Lord did here, into 4 parts. But no matter how you divide a man's nature, this much is clear. One part of man's nature affects the other parts, even to the point of our emotions and spirit affecting our physical health. We should keep every part of us in close contact with our Creator and deal with and overcome negative emotions and sinful practices in order to have the health our Creator intended us to have. This is especially proven true, so now I'm going to pad my time a little bit. During the COVID lockdown, what was the worst thing that came out of that? It wasn't how many people caught COVID, it's how many people got sick from being cut off from contact with other people who weren't allowed to go to church. There was probably more illnesses created by doing that to people emotionally and spiritually than COVID ever gave them. It was a terrible, terrible mistake. Terrible mistake. We all bought into it. I'll never get over the fact that, because of that, my mom spent the last days of her life locked in the nursing home where we couldn't even visit her except through the glass door. And my heart still breaks to this day, because had I known then what I knew now, I would have said, Mom, it doesn't matter how hard it's going to be, we're going to take you out. You're going to be with us. I didn't. A lot of other people didn't. A lot of people saw their parents, their husbands, their wives die without them even being in a room. It was a terrible mistake. And the cure in that case was worse than the disease. It won't happen again. I don't see it happening for us as a nation. It sure won't happen as a church. We won't close down for anybody ever again under those kind of circumstances. So, but that shows the connection between the emotional and the social and the spiritual and the physical. It hurt schools. Kids were put way back in their reading and in their writing and in their learning because they couldn't socialize. You couldn't replace it. Yeah, you couldn't replace it with Zoom meetings. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't. God didn't create us that way. So keep this in mind. And when you're trying to live your best life, oh wait, never mind. That's quoting somebody I don't want to quote. When you're living the life God intends you to live as He would have it, remember these things. Yeah, you need to exercise. You need to watch what you eat. You need to go to church. You need to socialize. You need to read your Bible. We're all connected. And if you want to have that very best life that God wants for you, then by all means, put those things together and do what the Bible tells us to do. Read the book of Proverbs, and it'll make a big difference in your life. And please, please have a good, positive attitude in everything that you're dealing with and everything that you're going through. All right. Should be some input on this one. Everybody's dealt with this in some way or the other. So, nurses, got anything?